Hello, it's time for another episode of Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm Stephanie Ricca, as always, here with STR's Isaac Collazo and co-star Jan Freitag. Hi, guys.
Hello, Steph. Happy holidays.
It's
One more
December, our final Tell Me More podcast of the year. We made it. We did it. We are going to have some quiet reflection on our year in review a little bit later on in the podcast. But you know what? There is still plenty of time left in 2024 for hotel performance to just shoot off the charts, right? So
Right.
Isaac, maybe.
Okay, maybe. Okay.
Have I built it up? In other words, get us started on some data highlights because we need to end the year on a high note.
And actually, it was a weird but good month in the U.S. and the world, actually, if you think about it. Weird in that the U.S., we had the presidential election. Remember that? Remember how long ago that was?
It's been a month.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah, and that happened earlier in this earlier in November, and then we had a very weird end of November because Thanksgiving was a week later this year than it was a year ago, and there's more. See, no, that's not commercial now, and there's more.
Wait,
Yes.
there's more.
Tell us.
Yes, tell me more. In addition, we had an extra Friday and Saturday this November versus last year. So yes, November was actually turned out to be a really good month with U.S. industry RevPAR advancing 2.5% in the month on occupancy growth, which was different. We haven't seen that very often this year because ADR was under 1% in terms of its gain. And I think the thing we have to keep in mind here is November inflation was 2.7, resulting in a 1.9% gap in ADR growth to CPI. Essentially meaning inflation adjusted real ADR went backwards. And it's something we got to keep harping on because I think that's very important as well. This month, we kind of had a reverse bifurcation as well. RevPAR in mid-scale and economy increased by more than 5%, while upscale, and upper mid-scale averaged 2.6%. However, the real star of the show still is luxury, where RevPAR increased by 5.3%.
Reverse bifurcation? I have to jump in here.
Wow.
That's the first time we've heard that particular turn of phrase on the pod.
Yeah, it was really just different. Again, we do have luxury still outperforming everyone else, but it is still a change from what we had seen in the past. And then now we're going to delve
one of
into
those gymnastics routines that we have at the Olympics.
Exactly. Like the name of a vault.
Exactly. The reverse bifurcation. I'll take that one. Let's talk about room demand. It increased 2.2% in the month. It's sixth gain of the past 8 months. So again, really, we've been seeing some momentum here, and we've been seeing some upward trends. Each time it increases, we're seeing a little bit better growth. So that's a really good thing. And then looking back at history, November's total room demand was the second highest ever for the month of November that we've recorded here at STR, the highest being in 2019. But don't get excited. Let's think about this. This year's room demand, you could get excited about this. This year's room demand was 667,000 less nights behind the 2019 record. And if you think about it a different way, the U.S. hotel industry, or each U.S. hotel, sold 10 less rooms on average this November than it did in 2019. So that's not a big gap. So that's actually a really positive thing, even though it's 667,000 room nights. But if you think on a hotel level basis, where there are about 64,000 hotels or a little bit more than that. So again, that's not that bad. The other thing we noticed is room demand growth was nearly identical between the top 25 markets and all other ones. Some of that's being driven by the hurricane recovery efforts in the South still. So that's part of that. Luxury saw the largest gain in terms of room demand of the chain scales. It was up 8.7%. Think about that. And economy the smallest at 0.8, but economy was up. So that's a very key thing. Another thing to remember, supply increased by 0.6 this month. That's the largest monthly increase since September of 2022. So now you have lots of things moving around. But because you have supply increasing and then you still have had demand not reaching the 2019 levels consistently, we're still about 3.3 percentage points behind 2019 in occupancy. Moving on a little bit more in terms of year-to-date RevPAR for the U.S. is up 1.6%. It's the highest year-to-date value of the year so far, and it advanced from 1.5% year-to-date last month. The gap to inflation dropped to 1.4%. meaning that inflation grew 1.4% more year to date than RevPAR. Just keep thinking about that. And compared to 2019, real RevPAR is 6.2% in arrears. So there's still a pretty big gap to 2019. For the year, RevPAR remained above 2% in luxury and upper upscale. Mid-scale was flat, whereas economy and independents are still negative. Even though we saw some better growth in November, again, year to date, they're still negative. The Northeast had the highest year-to-date RevPAR growth at 5.5%, led by the top 25 markets in those locations where RevPAR grew 7.7%. Again, that's a year-to-date number. And then, but we go to the West, year-to-date RevPAR is still negative. And this month, it was really negative. The RevPAR in the West was down 4.4%. So again, it didn't help a lot. It actually brought it down. Now, quickly looking at global RevPAR, it increased 7.5%, including the US, and 9.4% excluding it. This was the second highest monthly RevPAR gain of the year for the global set. And for the year, RevPAR is up 6.8% when you exclude the US. Growth outside the US continued to be fueled by ADR, which was up 6.9% in the month and 5.6% for the year. Room demand also advanced, up 3.9%, with nearly all key countries except Mexico seeing growth.
That has been the story of the year, Isaac. I mean, not to jump the gun, but
it has, yeah, it has been. It's just really interesting. But occupancy, you'll see that actually, Mexico RevPAR is still pretty good. It's just it's coming from the occupancy side and less so on the ADR side, right, or the demand side, if I remember. Sorry, I said it backwards, but you saw it. Let me rephrase that. Yes, because we said room demand is down, so it's been coming from ADR. I do know. I can read my notes here. Thank you. It's my chicken scratch. You know that. I can't even read my own handwriting. It's pretty bad. And then just some of the countries, I just want to call out some countries like Latin America, excluding Mexico, Australia, Japan, UK, Italy, Germany, and India all saw demand increase by more than 3% this month. And we've been seeing those kind of growth. So it's still really good growth. And then we think about RevPAR. RevPAR for the year is up more than 20% in India and by 18% in Japan, all on ADR advancement.
I believe it. Yeah. I believe it based on the reporting we've been doing this year and on data trends.
It's crazy. And then most key countries have year-to-date RevPAR growth above 3%, including Canada, and the Caribbean, France, Germany, and Mexico. So yeah, demand's been down, but Mexico's still doing rather okay, for the year-to-date. And also, I left out UK. And there's only one market that's in arrear, and that continues to be China. Yeah, and that's been the trend for most of this year, right? If I remember correctly, I forgot how many months that has been. But all in all, again, it was a weird but really pretty good month.
Interesting. So, Jan, what sticks out to you? When Isaac's given the highlights, what stays in your brain to say, ooh, interesting, in that very Jan-like way that you have?
You mean with a German accent when I say
interesting?
So I think when you talk about the global countries, I wonder if there is group demand. If November is just a stronger group month elsewhere, just because they don't have that vacation piece, that Thanksgiving break, that we have, where obviously not a lot is happening. Group demand in the US for the month, group RevPAR was down 5.1% because occupancy was down 5%, right? Obviously the election didn't help. People stayed home, and there was this whole point. If you look at Washington D.C., had a very bad month, because people said, let's just stay away from that market. Year to date, group still a good success story, up 5%. When you just look at demand, just for November, down 500,000 rooms, number of group rooms sold for luxury and upper upscale. So the group piece, I think this is an outlier. I'm still bullish on group, and we'll continue to talk about group and small groups, and we will record a forecast episode of Tell Me More where we look forward for 2025, and that's going to be one of my topics, talking about small groups. So we continue to be pretty bullish, I think is the word on that. Go ahead.
I'd say, Jan, the only thing I just remember about November about the group side, it was bookended, right? Remember, you had not only the elections, but then you have Thanksgiving. So you really only had 2 really good weeks. I might have to look at my calendar. It's 2 weeks, I think, between that for group. So I think that's why it was down. It's not. I think group is still strong. I'm with you. I think group is strong, but it just was
we didn't have enough days. We ran out of days, basically.
That's what everyone's saying at this time of year. We've just run out of time.
Right.
And I think the other piece, Isaac keeps mentioning it, but ADR growth is just, underwhelming. There's just not a whole lot there. Despite the reverse, what do we call it?
Reverse bifurcation.
You can't say it? Is it a bad word? Is it a bad word in German?
The ADR change, for the high-end transient ADR growth is 0%. Group we just talked about minus 0.1%. There's just not a whole lot there. So that's what continues to sort of not keep me up at night, but what we're wondering, like, what does it take to get some sustained pricing power back?
And chasing inflation all year.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much.
So the question is, is this the new normal? And what does that imply? We've now had 2 consecutive months of healthy occupancy increases, right? Are we now in this later part of the cycle where ADR growth continues to stay anemic? And I shouldn't talk about it anymore because it's just the new normal. But we're therefore seeing what that implies is hoteliers offering better value, offering, pay for 2 nights, stay for 3, or something like that. I don't want to call it discounting, but something to that effect. And so then, therefore, are we actually seeing the impact on the traveler who's saying, oh, everything is getting more expensive, but hotels maybe not, or hotels not as much. So maybe people are traveling, and we see that in the positive impact on the occupancy. I don't know. That's not a hot take. That's just sort of how we look at the data right now. But when we look at our forecast for next year, Isaac and I will have a conversation about that.
There's so many moving pieces. I do think there's an economic component. We've talked about this before, so I do believe that's a piece of it. But then you also have the return of group, which could be also suppressing ADR growth because that's a negotiated or any kind of other transient stuff. So I think there's just a lot of moving pieces at this point, and you have to get down to almost what kind of rate codes, what are people actually, has the mix of business truly changed within the hotel industry, and is that what's lowering ADR? But I don't think it's simple to answer at this point.
No, agreed. I think there are a lot of moving pieces. I think we will continue to look at this,
right?
But maybe I just have to get rid of this thought that ADR growth should outpace CPI, right? Which is what we have said forever and ever and ever and ever, and which is why real estate investors like this asset type, because we can reset our lease every night. Our leases only last 1 night versus 10 years or 5 years. That's the beauty. The beast is that sometimes you can also cut your rate every night.
Now remember, it's the end of the year. We can't be manifesting bad things on our vision boards for 2025.
I'm just saying theoretically.
Those are all things that we will put a bookmark in to keep on our watch list for 2025. All right, Isaac, you are up first this month to share your topic of choice for the month. And what you are going to talk about is another one of those things that have been growing in terms of what we hear in news headlines, especially from brand companies over the last couple months. So give us what you got.
Yeah, I've been looking at conversion activity. So again, we're very blessed here at STR to be able to track every hotel and when it changes a flag or goes independent or wherever, or goes into renovation, right? So we've built these algorithms where we look at all by hotel. So we're looking at this by hotel throughout of time. And so what I did is look at October 2024 year to date to see how many hotels have gone through a conversion. And a conversion is any kind of flag change. It could be to another company, it could be within the same company, a different brand, or it could be from brand to independent to brand. So that's the conversion, right? So year to date, we've had 1,103 hotels go through a conversion, and that is higher than it was a year ago, but not incredibly high. A year ago, we had about 1,000 hotels. And what was astonishing to me, because we've heard so much about conversions post-pandemic, is that the level of conversions over the last several years continues to be below the 20-year average. Normally in October, you'd have October year to date, about 1,424 hotels on average convert. And so I thought that continues to be very interesting to me. And of the hotels that made a switch this year, the largest change was with properties that went from branded to independent. 391 properties.
You just buried the lead. That's the nugget right there.
And then it's followed by hotels that switched to a brand of another parent company, which is 333 properties. And then additionally, 251 hotels converted from independent to a brand, while 128 changed brands but remained within the same parent company. So I thought that was really interesting. Of the total hotels open and operating, only 1.7% of the total hotel stock in the U.S. converted in some way, shape, or form this year. And the long-term average is about 2.4% of total supply.
So many factors at play in conversion, economic and otherwise. Jan, what are they?
So interesting number that you mentioned there, 1.6% of total US inventory is changing brands. We are only growing inventory by 0.6%, which is why a lot of the publicly traded companies on their earnings calls always point back at those conversion numbers. Now, I think the other asterisk to this number is that this is, you're looking about US, right? I think a lot of the publicly traded companies are always saying, well, but there's so much greenfield opportunity out there in Italy, in Korea, in wherever, right? In other areas around the world where we have a lot more independents who are ripe for the picking, who are ripe for us to put our brands on them. But I think this is a super interesting trend, right? That that this percentage of the properties that changing flags, it's only 1.6%, but wow, it's 1.6%.
It used to be 2.4. So just remember, I mean, again, it is still down. What's interesting, I'm looking at the chart right now. That's a good thing about being at the office. We can actually look at charts live and in person. And, over the last literally 5 years, it's just been the activity of conversion has been lower than it was prior to the pandemic. And yet we expected it to be higher. That's the thing, is all of us expected, because interest rates are so high and things, we thought more hotels would take that plunge and convert to something else. And then the most interesting thing to me when I really dug into it is the biggest gap to the conversion activity is the independent piece, both branded to independent. There are less hotels doing that today than the 20-year or long-term average. And also the other way, independent to branded. There are less doing that. And if you look at...
Can I ask you real quick to clarify, Isaac, that when you look at that stat of branded to independent, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's typically on the economy end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But it does have other chain scales. It does happen, but not to the same extent. It's almost a life cycle
That's kind
process.
of the end of the line, dare I say, part of the life cycle in some independent economy brand or some economy branded hotels that aren't keeping up with the system. And the other part that's curious to me too is we've seen a lot of the big brands launch both new build brands and conversion brands. That some of those conversion brands that they launched pre-pandemic have only now just begun to pick up activity.
Right. And another interesting fact is thinking about all this, because again, this is fascinating data. You could spend so much time studying this. So one of the things I wanted to know is of the number of hotels that converted this year, how many did so for the first time? And that was 23%. So 23% of the hotels that have converted this year, of the 1,000, whatever it was, I said, this is their first conversion since they opened.
Which tells you...
I think the inverse is very interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you more. There's more. So then we had 19% of hotels did so for the second time, with another 18% doing their third conversion since their life, and 17% converting for a fourth time. And then what's really interesting is that there's 23%, which is exactly the same number as the one that did it for the first time. So 23% converted for the first time ever. Another 23% converted or have converted 5 or more times. And there are hotels out there with double-digit conversions.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've been around for a long time, right? If you were first generation Holiday Inn, right?
Yeah.
Built in the 1970s, 1960s.
But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised some of these. Yes, that's the life cycle. I would 100% agree with you. If you were built in the 50s, you've gone through the life cycle, you may have gone through multiple brands. But some are not that old. And they're
like
just
going through multiple spouses.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
You know, you're on your third or fourth brand. You decide to go independent. I feel like there's a story here.
And then some go independent, back to branded, back to independent. I mean, it is the most amazing thing. You know, you would love to speak to the owner of the hotel or potentially owners, because they could have switched ownership as well. But going, okay, what are you thinking? There's a lot of switching costs here, because there are switching costs, as we all know. So, but fascinating data, worth playing with it more, and then we'll have to do the global piece. That's the next piece I'll do, because the data's there. Just a matter of doing the algorithm.
Jan, any color to add to the conversion story?
Well, just when you talk about switching costs, I think part of the conversion is, of course, that the argument is that the switching cost is actually less, right? That the brand is saying, hey, we want you to reinvest your PIP. And the owner is like, I can't, I won't. And then you go down to a different brand. And so I thought the other stat that you had within parent company conversion, right? You go from Hampton to a Spark or something, that's certainly part of the conversation that we're hearing about when we're at the industry conferences, which is why those brands were invented for in the first place.
And just to follow up on that, the brand change, but same parent, the number of properties this year versus the long-term average is almost identical. So I didn't see like a real increase in that, but I'd have to look at the time series to see over time if we're seeing an increase. But against the long-term average, it's almost identical, just basically the same number of properties.
It'll be interesting to see the spark effect on that specifically, because that was designed to have a high volume of that within parent company conversion. Another great topic to keep an eye out for next year and beyond. Jan, it's your turn to share your particular topic of the month. There's a lot of chatter going on this time of year in the U.S. around some implications on the industry that political changes, administration changes may have. A lot still very much up in the air, but definitely things for hoteliers in our industry to keep an eye on and prepare for. What are you going to talk about this month?
Yeah, the incoming administration has been very, very clear that immigration/deportation is top of their to-do list, probably on January 21 or maybe January 20, when the new administration takes office. And so that rhetoric has me a little bit worried, just because, when we travel, we interact with a lot of people, and we know that large parts of the workforce of the U.S. hotel industry were not born here. So I went to our macroeconomic forecasters, Oxford Economics, specifically their subsidiary Tourism Economics. I talked to Aaron Ryan from their shop, and I said, give me a little bit of context here. Give me some data. And so he was able to put together two charts, and I just want to rattle off a couple of numbers here that I just think are sort of helpful to frame the conversation. So they took the Bureau of Labor Statistic data, and they dug really deep into it, but it said here, share of employment for a couple of different industries, non-U.S. citizen employment by sector. So for landscaping services, not a big surprise, I don't think, 29% of the employed people weren't born here. Crop production, so agriculture, 26%, construction, 19%, and then hotels and accommodation, 15%. So you're like, okay, 15%, that's actually a little bit lower than I would have thought, but they were able to dig into this a little bit more, and no surprise, housekeeping came up on top. So a third, 34% of all housekeepers in the hotel and accommodation sector are non-U.S. citizens, 24% of cooks, 21% of housekeeping supervisors, and so down the list, and we can certainly make these slides available. I just thought it was really helpful and honestly a little bit scary to think about that there will be an impact on the people who are providing these jobs. Now, clearly the administration is saying, hey, this is about unlawful immigrants, right? We want to kick out the unlawful immigrants. And I get that. But I do wonder if there are knock-on effects. If in certain industries, suddenly people are afraid to come to work, if in certain industries, some people self-deport, where the kids are saying, look, I'm legal, my parents are not, I don't want them to get kicked out of the country, let us all move back to wherever we're coming from. Are there implications here for higher wages, or a lot higher wages going forward? Are there implications here for not having enough people to do the work, especially because we know some union contracts now mandate daily housekeeping services, but what if we don't have the housekeepers? So that is something I'm talking about, I'm thinking about. Everybody who wants to talk to me about it, I can't get enough of this topic because I really want to know more about what are the implications, and is this just rhetoric through the campaign? Or is this going to happen, and how is it going to happen? How are we going to see the new immigration executive orders or the deportation executive orders come and trickle down to our industry? I'm very curious to see that.
Yeah, I share the exact same thoughts. And as we're thinking about forecasts and everything, I do worry about that will cause inflation, because that's, there's limited labor supply, and that prices rise, right? That's just the way it works. If supply falls and demand is high, there'll be demand for people. Then you're going to see wage increase, which then means you're going to have margin pressures on hotels as well. And the other piece is, already hotels have not returned to full capacity in terms of the labor pool. So you're just adding, again, more pressure on that side of the equation. So yes, I think it's a real thing. I'm cautiously optimistic that it won't be as bad as it could be, because I don't think it's going to go. There's extremes, right? Deport everyone, or deport certain. You just don't know. And again, that to me, and from forecasting, because I've got asked this question multiple times, how are you factoring that into your forecast? We can't, because we really don't know what the outcome will be or how far it'll go. We will, once we know what the new laws are, the new policies, then we'll be able to factor it into forecast. But I think it's a real threat. And it's also, again, it's inflationary on multiple sides, not on the hospitality side, but also in farming, restaurants, everything that also supports the restaurant or the hotel hospitality side. So you could see the return of inflation potentially.
The other wrinkle that I'm very curious about is, if in this whole rhetoric around immigration, if the temporary work visa that are so critical for seasonal resorts will get impacted. Mountain towns like Vail or Aspen or beach towns, in Florida cannot function without temporary influx of temporary workers. And there's workforce housing there, but we need those people to make those hospitality markets run. And I wonder if there's an unfortunate knock-on to those visa numbers. So very, very curious to see how the new administration handles that.
There might be. In the past, you've seen various administrations raise or lower the cap on H-2Bs and, manipulate it, change some of the timing in those cases, which can have all of that, you call it trickle-down effect. It's also kind of a snowball effect when you see it happening cumulatively over a couple of years. We've done some really interesting reporting on Hotel News Now about some of these issues that are popping up around labor that we'll all keep an eye on moving into next year.
Yeah, and the American Hotel and Lodge Association is obviously fully on this, and they will be lobbying very, very hard for us to not roll back and have a backward knock-on effect. But it's going to be super interesting to see how well their efforts pay off.
All right, it's time for my topic of choice for the month. And because since this is our final podcast of the year in December, I want to just get warm and fuzzy for a second, guys. And I would like us all to, it's like Thanksgiving where you go around the table and say what you're thankful for. I want each of us to share a quick memorable moment from our 2024 year of Tell Me More. And I'm going to start by talking about our inaugural live episode of the podcast, which we recorded in August of this year at Hotel Data Conference. It was so much fun. It was a huge hit. And I will say to readers who might doubt or wonder if this podcast that we produce every month is some sort of like magic AI
Notebook LM. We're not.
We're real.
Not. We are 100% real, 100%, well, maybe 99% unscripted, and very much of the conversation in the moment. And that's what made that live version of the podcast a whole lot of fun for me. Isaac, what was your highlight moment?
Multiple times at that podcast, I remember Jan saying, you have the graph on your computer, because I was talking about something and I failed to look down at my computer because there was the graph that would help me answer the question. So that was pretty funny.
Hey, you guys have a tough job. It's worse than acting and remembering lines. You have to have numbers, data.
You got to remember, and you got to remember where it's at.
But if it's right in front of him, I mean, he should be able to read his own chart. I'm just saying.
He looked at me and goes, "It's right there." I said, "Oh, it is right there." The other thing I remember is every time we've done something off-site, I always seem to have a cough. And I'm always trying to talk and not cough at the same time. And you guys are staring me down going, don't cough, don't cough, don't cough. And then I have to run to a corner and cough and run back to the mic. And that's always been, and it seemed to happen in New York. It happened in Atlanta, and it happened again in Los Angeles. I guess that's the first time it happened. It was in LA at Alice. But I just like, what is it when I travel that I get a cough? And it's not just like a little cough. And Jan's giving me all these German drugs or lozenges. It's like, here, have one of these, have one of these.
So clear it right up.
See, this is the authenticity, right? We talk about the real experience and the authenticity. That's what it is. Jan, what was a favorite moment for you?
My favorite moments are unfortunately not visible to our audience, but you have a lot of hand gestures that tell us when to shut up, when to get louder, when to get closer to the mic, when to move left, when to move right, when to just stop it, just wrap it up. So those are always very, very funny. Unfortunately, nobody else can see them, but I appreciate them.
Well, I'm glad that you both understand them. And I think that it, maybe someday we will bring the video behind the scenes of our podcast. See, I'm saying that now, and they're both
we're making hand gestures right now.
They're making hand gestures saying, no, never in a million years. All right. Audio is why we're here. And I think it's been a very memorable year, but we're not done yet. It is, of course, our customary closing to the podcast to have each of you share your take on what hotel industry performance is like right now. For our regular listeners, I don't need to explain what this segment is anymore. It is a weird conglomeration of memorable similes and metaphors. So let's just go for it. Jan, right now, this moment in time, what's the hotel industry comparison for you?
My mom turned 80 2 weeks ago, so I went home for a very long weekend to Germany, and it's right now the time of the Christmas market. And from the outside, it is cold, it is dreary, it is wet, and it doesn't seem very inviting. So to me, the hotel industry right now looks like that. It's just dark and dreary, and there's not a lot going on. But then you get a little closer, and you find your little pocket, and you drink a little alcohol, and things get a lot better. So that's my simile.
All we need is a little Glühwein.
Or a Feuerzangenbowle, as we like to say. But yes.
Is that the mold? Yeah, is that the wine we had?
That's wine you set on fire.
Yeah,
it is really good. It's so dark and dreary out there. They invented flaming alcohol just to make it more festive and just to get through the winter. So that's what we're drinking.
So we need our metaphoric flaming alcohol to light a fire under industry performance. I love it.
Yes, let's go.
Love it. It works. Isaac?
And I'm not changing my vein. You know where I go all the time. It's always about music. And again, what Jan was talking about, well, basically what you were talking about in terms of the potential changes in labor force and now how it's dark and dreary, but you get nice and warm. I kind of went the same vein, but mine's a little bit more hopeful. Mine is, the hospitality industry is a fragile thing. Just like The Cure is singing in their current album, Songs of the Lost World. And the words, I mean, you think about it, it's like nothing you can do but sing the love of the hospitality is a fragile thing. You can't pretend you can change it. You can't go back, but you can change it. Those are some of the words and lyrics. I just kind of read that really quickly. But again, that's what I think it is. And I think right now in this recovery process, it is a fragile thing. We are in the cusp of potentially, we have a lot of optimism out there in the industry that things are going to get really much better with the new administration. But then you have the other piece going, ooh, it could be worse because if we have tariffs and labor issues, but you just don't know. So fragile thing, The Cure.
I don't know if The Cure is our soundtrack for 2025. It might be a very depressing year.
Oh, I love The Cure. I think
something tells me you'll have more uplifting songs. And, before we go, I have a holiday present that I want to share with you both that you don't know about. And of course, with our listeners, regular fans of the pod know that this final segment often turns into a music discussion like we just had with Isaac, more often than not, comparing industry performance to a song and then sending it to Jan and I afterward. And then we have a chat about the lyrics and see what happened. So as a special gift, I have created a Spotify playlist that includes the songs that you've mentioned this year. And I will share that with you both and with our listeners. Of course, you are always welcome to invite any of us to your karaoke night for us to sing them live. As always, thank you both for your insight. And thank you to our listeners. It's been a fantastic year in the Tell Me More podcast universe. Find the latest global hotel industry news on hotelnewsnow.com. Find this podcast wherever you like to listen, and make sure to give these guys both follows on LinkedIn. We really appreciate that you've spent the year with us. We will see you again in 2025. And in fact, as we mentioned earlier, we are dropping a special bonus episode in early January with some predictions for hotel industry activity and trends. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast, was recorded on December 17 by me, Stephanie Ricca. The episode was edited by Sean McCracken. Find all hotel industry news at hotelnewsnow.com. Subscribe to this and all Hotel News Now podcasts wherever you like to listen. Just search for Hotel News Now. Thank you.